A very good morning to you, South Africa. This is the South African Morning, keeping you abreast of all the day's stories, everything that you need to know. Now, taking a look at legal issues and labor issues, we do know that South Africa boasts one of the highest unemployment figures in the world. And for years, there's been tension across communities over the employment of foreign nationals. Government has now stepped in and they're calling for quotas to be put in place for businesses to hire local workers. This is included in the proposed amendments to the Employment Services Act. Let's get some analysis on this with Labour consultant Tony Healy. Very good morning to you, Tony. Good to have you with us. Now, when we talk about labour laws, I think a lot of people and a lot of employers are very familiar with the Labour Relations Act, very familiar with the Employment Equity Act. But when it comes specifically to the Employment Services Act, that one is not really that much spoken about. Tell us a bit about it and what it prescribes and what it speaks to.
Good morning, Tommy. Yes, it really links to the national migration labour policy infrastructure and to some degree the Employment Equity Act. But in simple language, it really details, amongst other things, how employers may need to go about employing foreign nationals and under what circumstances, and related legal issues around that whole subject, which is that which we're discussing this morning.
Now, the Employment Services Amendment Bill in 2021 was put on the table in order to relook at this bill, to safeguard employment for South Africans. What are some of the recommended requirements and changes to this legislation that have been put forward?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So the reasoning behind the bill is to protect jobs for South African citizens, permanent residents and refugees. Those are the three categories that are given priority. So in simple language, the bill is saying that in certain sectors, there will need to be a process that has to be followed to ensure that before a foreign national is employed in a particular position, it can be proven that there are no South African citizens, no permanent residents or no refugees that can do that job. So really, it's a form of job protection for South African citizens. And if a foreign national is employed in those circumstances, then after that, there needs to be a skills transfer process to ensure that a South African can take over that job in due course.
Tony, were these provisions not in this act beforehand? I'm thinking now, for example, if you're trying to emigrate and trying to work in any country, the United States, for example, that seems to be a standard that you need to show extraordinary skill and extraordinary ability alongside the employer having to prove that you cannot find a local or a permanent resident who's able to fill that post. Was this not there before?
Yes, I think internationally that's right. If you apply for a job overseas, you need to compete with a local with the same skills and hope that you can, you're going to bring greater skills and competencies to the party than the local applicant. I think this bill goes a little further than that. For example, as you may have mentioned, it includes a discussion around quotas. So, for example, the quotas in terms of the number of foreign nationals that can be employed can be set within job sectors, within occupational categories, and within geographic areas. And that's a step that we're seeing in this particular bill that is less common internationally.
How is government going to determine which sectors are going to be under a quota system? Because I suppose these will vary depending on the market conditions.
That's a very good question. And the Helen Suzman Foundation has raised that very point. And they've said, where have you got your data from? What is your research to say that this is even necessary in the first place? But I mean, anecdotally, if you'll see, for example, there are particular sectors that do especially attract foreign nationals, and hospitality and tourism is one of those sectors. So you'll find there's quite a high percentage of foreign nationals working in particularly in the high-end hospitality and tourism areas, and that's perhaps an area that is being targeted by this particular bill. But there are lots of questions around where is the data that suggests that this is actually necessary in the first place. Because if you look at South Africa's unemployment disaster that we've had for the last 25 years, it's not really in the high-end skills that we have an unemployment problem. It's more in the lower-level jobs, not the kind of scarce skills where I think this particular bill is focusing.
I see here that the bill makes provision, and the minister says that there are going to be requirements for the employers to make use of public employment services or private employment agencies in order to recruit citizens, permanent residents or refugees. Are we talking about middlemen once again? You'll know that this has been a very contentious issue as far as service providers are concerned in this area specifically of recruitment. What are your thoughts on this? How do you see this unfolding?
Yeah, you're right to ask that question. Every time we have a middleman, there seems to be some kind of questionable activity when it comes to taking a slice of the pie, if you like. The other issue here is, I come from the school of thought that says we already have an unnecessarily over-regulated labor law environment, which is not fit for purpose when nearly half the country is unemployed. And as it is, it's already extremely difficult for existing legislation to be monitored and enforced. And if you increase, my view is, and many others, Helen Suzman Foundation is one of them, are questioning the viability of this, everything that's included in the bill and all of the bureaucracy that needs to go around it. And the very issue that you raise, which is, if there are more people involved midstream, then what are happening to the finances in the recruitment process?
And how is this prospectively going to be policed? I see there are fines as well for employers who don't abide by this, should it become law.
Well, look, there is an Employment Equity Commission, and there'll be others who will be the Department of Labour in general that will be monitoring these things if the bill is passed. The extent to which they'll be able to do that thoroughly and effectively, time will tell. But look, we must remember this bill came out last year. It's still in the process of debate. Whether it will be enacted in its current form remains to be seen. But I think it's right that we are to some degree concerned about what it contains and how it proposes to go about doing what it's proposing to do.
And we'll leave it at that for this morning. So thank you so much for your time and that input on the bill, which is not yet law. That's a Labour consultant, Tony Healy, their efforts by the government to ensure that locals are protected as far as employment is concerned. But not only locals. If you are a permanent resident in South Africa, then you will also benefit from that. If you are a refugee, then you will also benefit for that. So the bill is still out. Comments are still being awaited, and whether or not this will be passed into law, I guess only time can tell.